All right, hello everyone. My name is Sarah Norris. I am the coordinator here in the Career Services office at SUNY Brockport. Today we are having our career conversation with Steve Bergonzi. He's an alumni, graduated from Brockport with his Bachelor of Science in History back in 2011. We are super excited to be chatting with him today. How are you today, Steve?
I'm good.
Good. All right, so we'll dive right into the questions that I have for you today. First one being, just tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, specific to careers or
This is
just generally?
just give us a little general overview.
Okay. You say like I'm a nice guy, I'm a fun guy,
Perfect. And it was like one of those interview
Um,
questions. Tell us about yourself.
there we go. Yeah, so I graduated from Brockport back in 2011, I think. Did an honors thesis. I worked under Dr. Spiller and learned a lot while I was at Brockport from the history department. I thought it was a really, really strong department, and the skills they taught you were just. I used them far more than I even use lawyering skills that I learned in law school, believe it or not, but that's possible. So, it's just a great all around. I always say the history majors are writing a really solid, like writing analytical major. You can really apply it to a lot of different things. So, it was definitely awesome. After that, I went to law school, went to Washington University in St. Louis, went 3 years there, and then kind of halfway through, kind of was pitched to me randomly that a lot of lawyers who burn out go into like development work, fundraising, account management, whatever the process would be, just because the hours are a little less crazy and it's comparable in pay, and you get to meet some interesting people. It's more interactive, and I've always been sociable, so that seemed like a really cool idea. And they said you still have a lot of since you're dealing with a lot of money, managing it and whatnot, that a law degree definitely helps, and can be a really good base to even kind of launch a law practice because you have kind of a built-in client base when you join a firm. So, a financial firm. So that was kind of what was pitched to me. So I went into like fundraising, development work for a couple different places. I don't know if you guys still have a call center at Brockport, but I was a call center manager nationwide for that company, Ruffalo Noah Levitt. So went all over, went to a whole different group, basically. Can't even count the number of schools, but I was all over. It was 100% travel, so I was living all over and basically setting up phonathons, running them until, setting up the phonathon, training the managers, training everybody there, and then moving on to the next one. Just said I did really, really well with calling. As I actually did calling as a law student. Um, so that was my first job, and then I took a few more kind of oddball jobs, just because that was when you switch kind of within a field, you end up going from with call centers, you're kind of categorized as like a over the phone person. So in order to become more of an in-person person, which is where I wanted to be, and where the higher paying opportunities are, and just in general more interesting opportunities for me, you kind of had to. I almost took a hit. It's like you go up, but then you take a hit a little bit because you're switching. So I ended up basically almost volunteering practically for a nonprofit. They eventually put me on salary just once they showed them my value. But essentially it was maybe for like 2-3 months I was just really showing them what I could do in terms of major gifts, because no one with major giving, no one's gonna. No, you need experience. You need to have experience to get experience, and to get
Mm-hmm.
experience and to have experience. So the only way you can really do it is find some hole in the wall place. And I literally just showed up in a suit, was like, "Hey, I can help you."
Perfect.
And funny enough, I ended up my best friend now is the guy who was kind of funding it, and so it's just kind of funny how that happens. But yeah, so I did that for like a year, and then obviously I got like a little higher paying one, because I had the experience, quote unquote. And then from there, I literally got a job at Temple University as their major gifts officer for like a science technology college. So it was cool. I mean, did that for a year. Then I moved up again, became a director of development for the Syracuse Zoo. So I did that for a year, and that was a lot of fun. I raised money for I was basically the one who raised the money for that Amber Leopard exhibit that you may see or advertised or whatever. Check it out when you go by there. They're really
Hilarious.
smart though, because they sent me a donation thing after I left to donate to the Amber Leopards. Smart people all over there. But at any rate, so that was a lot of fun. And then I moved back to Rochester, just where my family's from. my wife and I or we're expecting a child, so it just made more sense to be close. We were already trying to get back from grad school, but we're dual career. She's a biomedical engineering PhD, so we kind of are hopping around trying to eventually both get back to Rochester. Both have because we both need like full time, really high level professional jobs. It's not that easy in a city of Rochester's size, so we kind of had to time it right, and that's part of the thing. So we eventually both got back here and I found a job in finance because I thought, I liked fundraising, but you end up thinking, well, I'm bringing in millions of dollars, but like I have a kid, like they need money for college and whatnot, and I'm not seeing any percentage of what I'm bringing in. So like finance is kind of that interesting field where I would keep doing what I'm doing, but get commissions and whatnot. So it just made more sense. It was something I was already interested in doing, so it's kind of how I ended up here.
Well, we're certainly glad to have you back in the Rochester area. It's always nice to see our alumni back home. Um, so tell us a little bit. You kind of gave us a talk through what you've done up to this point. So tell us a little about where you are now, currently working.
Yes.
You up to?
Oh, currently, yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'm a the we're working out the title because there's a lot of different things I can do for them, but essentially, I'm a estate planner and investment counsel, which basically just means that I sit down with people and really specialize in sort of late stage, setting up people for retirement, for passing on assets, wealth, and if they have questions on kind of investment counsels where I mainly focus, which is figuring out which vehicles to use to kind of maximize their situation because investments are so varied. I mean, there's a million different ones out there. Each company has their own ones, and so you really spend a lot of time figuring out what's really best for them. So then that's kind of what I was doing with development, but this really allows me to help everybody, my family, and because not everyone's going to donate to the Syracuse Zoo, and if they're not a Temple alumni, so
Yep.
so this is really great because I can really like, oh, mom, you need Medicare, let me help you with that, or like, oh, dad, you don't have a great retirement plan, like you start realizing all these things, so it definitely helps. And of course, when you're in finance, you have the licenses and everything, you do get kind of, I wouldn't call them benefits, but I'd call them sort of breaks. You aren't charged really a lot of fees. So because and I make commission. So like I took out a life insurance policy on my wife, and then I made money on it, and took out one. So like, it's kind of nice. You can get commissions from stuff you do for your own self. So
Uh,
ish. I mean, there's rules on that, but some things, you can.
well, good. It sounds like you're enjoying where you're at. And I know that you just recently graduated from law school. So, question for that is, what made you decide to attend law school? I know you said kind of were looking into switching career fields and everything. So, what was kind of the deciding factor there for you?
Well, yeah. So this is something I always talk about with undergraduates because I noticed it in myself and with but especially other people. It was like I'd talk to someone at Brockport being like in her second year, and I'd be like, oh, what major do you choose? And they're like, oh, I'm still deciding. Like they'd kind of view like choosing an undergraduate major as like what you're going to end up in, which is sure if you go to be a nurse, you're going to be a nurse, or if you go study structural engineering, you'll be going on to that, but by and large, most fields require an advanced degree. In fact, I would argue you need one. I mean, when we were hiring at the zoo for somebody, I had millions of resumes with a college on it. It was just as an undergraduate, and we were hiring for a development associate, which isn't a field, isn't a major. So it wouldn't. I wasn't even really. I didn't even look at the major, to be honest with you. I literally just looked at. We kind of started with what their if they went to college, and then we kind of looked at their experience as far as anything relevant in terms of like, well, for development, any sort of, were they like in Greek society, were they in clubs, were they are they sociable basically, and then we kind of brought them in for that based on those kind of things. Not really, I just didn't care. So it was irrelevant
Yeah.
because it doesn't really like, so that's what I'm kind of saying is like what you choose as a major doesn't really matter to employers or really to graduate schools too. I mean, so I started going back to law school. I basically chose history just because I really loved it in high school. It's my best subject, so I just kind of went off that. And I definitely had several impactful teachers in social studies. So I knew it was my favorite field. I mean, I just love history in general. It's a personal thing. So I just went with my personal interest because I knew it'd be fun. Why go do a major that, So, I went in doing that, and I ended up kind of wanting to go the teacher route initially, just because, again, I just went into it with an open mind, And my wife, same thing. She went for imaging science at RIT. It's a very broad field. She didn't know what area she wanted to focus in, or even, now she's doing defense work. I mean, you know what I mean? She went for biomedical, now she's in defense work. Because the skills, the stuff is all applicable. And with history and with teaching, teaching taught me how to learn, so I can learn pretty much. They're like, over here at the firm now, they're like, we're going to have you do this certification, that license, this degree. They're going to pay for all that. Like, you know how to learn. I'm like, yeah, well. So that's really key. Like, teaching teaches you how to learn. So you can pretty much, because teachers have to basically look at something and understand it within, 2-3 minutes, on the fly, if that. So that's really what they teach you. And history kind of complemented that a lot, because it was really, and like I said, going back to the history department, it was so strong because they really did. The classes I took with them, the grading was based on how well you wrote, and how, not even just how well you wrote, but how well you internalized the material, analyzed it, and were able to succinctly explain it. Because, I learned pretty early on that when I did my first board presentation to one of the boards, I learned pretty early on that you put it on one page and you have at most 3 or 4 bullet points in like 14 size font, and that's the only thing on the page, because everything, they just gloss right over it. And that's not even just, it goes all the way from the people we deal with that we were helping, people from all different kinds of backgrounds, all the way up to board members. Was the same deal. Simple pictures, like almost like infographics were good, like money bad, or money, check mark, like just basic, because they're really looking at you and what you're saying. They don't really care what's, so I think history really helped me be able to like succinctly summarize something that really should be covered in 7 to 8 pages, and put it on like 1 page in a bullet point, because you're able to really explain things. And I also learned a lot of English stuff from history, like a lot of just don't say they, explain who exactly you're talking about, and those kind of things. There's a whole bunch of them that I remembered. So that was huge. I ended up in college tutoring in English, because I was so good at it. It was like they taught me that, really hammered it home, because you're really graded on that. And in law school, the same. I mean, it really is the same deal. You're really writing very succinctly. They grade on essays. It's all essays. And so your essay is 100% of your grade. So you don't get anything else besides that. It's at the end of the class, basically. So that's your only assignment, other than reading maybe a book a day sometimes. But yeah. So it really just I really did learn more in the history than I mean, law school, I went in there and I was writing, and the teachers were like, wow, like, where'd you, they're all like, they're like, wow, you're really, really good. Like, did you get a master's, or like, they're just, and I was like, yeah, no, I learned it in the Brockport history department. Of course, going to Wash U, I mean, I was the lone outsider. Like, everyone was Harvard, Princeton, Yale, all those kind of places. I had all sorts of celebrity kids, and celebrities themselves sometimes are just kind of awkward, but basically their parents or whatever. So, it was really cool, but like, it really was interesting that I was doing so well with, Brockport history department. And the teachers at the law school, I just wasn't as, I mean, granted, it's a different type of school. I mean, that's the type of school where, you do all your work yourself, and you're not helped at all. There's not even, the teacher, really, it's a researcher, comes up there and has to talk for an hour begrudgingly, and then, so that's why a lot of them don't even have attendance policies. That's how crazy it is. So yeah, it was a different experience, but it also was interesting that it really did help what I learned there. So.
Well, we're certainly glad to hear that Brockport set you up so well. That's very exciting. I'm sure all the history professors on here are loving that. So the
Swear
next
I'm not
question,
a key role. This is purely my.
yeah, no, you're doing great. So my next question for you is, what is the most important thing you have learned along your career path?
Well, probably the biggest one was definitely learning how to present things to people. And I often have to tell myself, you're thinking too much about it, because Work is not, I mean, the biggest difference is school is way more, and I'm in what would be called an intellectually challenging field. However, it's not even close to the level of rigor that you're put through in undergraduate and law school or wherever you decide to go. And that actually I wanted to bring up that, when you're choosing, going back to when you're choosing a major, you know, with the biggest, just pick one that you're interested in. You know what I mean? Like, or that you did well in, and what the one, like, in other words, your instinctual reaction, right? Well, what would I like to do? Pick that one. Because when you go to grad school, they don't really care really where you, I mean, look at me, they didn't care that I went to Brockport. They just looked at my GPA. So, and then my LSAT score. That's probably what I'd stress is you need to focus on the test, because the test is what basically they use to, graduate schools use to decide. I mean, they have a great big old red line if you're not above that. And usually with the best schools, like with mine, it was, 90th percentile, this percentile or higher. So, get your best grades, and if you're planning to go to grad school, get the best test. If you're not planning to go to grad school, you're in a field that's not really required, then get as much experience as you can in terms of clubs or anything else. But, as far as like what major you choose, it really has no impact. But I would say, you want to pick one, you want to go into these kind of fields, finance, law, not so much the math side. History is a great major for that, because it really does, like I was saying, teach you all these different skills. But going back to the question, which I probably forgot at this point.
Most important thing you've learned.
Yes. Yeah. So I would say definitely not overthinking, because, you really are put, the level of rigor is much more, much higher level than in school than it is. And that's just how it is, because, when you get into career work, a lot of it is, I would say, like template based. Like, what you need to do for, okay, I get these documents for this person, that document for this person, and then I fill it out as you would anything, right? Like, you fill out a credit card application, right? You're literally going through with the client and basically filling out a credit card application. So you need to know what each thing is. That's where the skills come in. You need to pick one that's best for them. But it's a lot more fun, because I know what would be good for them. I'm like, the minute they bring something up, I'm like, oh, bing, okay, so then you present it to them. So it's less. So, like, sometimes I notice, like, I'll be overthinking, like, oh, well, what if, what about this or this or that? And it's like, when in reality, the best option is usually the one that you identify, first, identify first. I mean, you can present the other ones, but I'm just saying, with school, you really do have to learn. You're learning, really in-depth, detailed concepts, and it's just not really work is not so much of that. It's more like applying what you learned to your work. So it's a little less like, I don't come home with like a splitting headache. Sometimes I do. Don't get me wrong. But it's not related to writing a paper. I can tell you that much. It's usually
Yeah.
something else. So I don't know. That's probably my best advice, or best thing probably the thing that I learned most is, like, I was overthinking, and like the way I presented things. I remember I wrote my first letter, and it was basically told to me that, oh, these people won't understand that. They're like, our clients, and these are clients that are millionaires, and they're like, no, they won't understand what and these, just because they used, sort of bigger words, so you really have to know your audience, I think, and know who you're speaking to. But even the most advanced intellectual minds, I was still putting it on a one page, with bullet points. So
Great. All right. I kind of feel like you've touched on this, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Um, what advice would you give to someone looking to get into this career field? I mean, you've touched on a couple things, but is there any, like, one piece of advice you think is really important?
for what, for wealth management, or
Yeah,
for.
like wealth management, or even like the law school path. Like, is there some advice you'd give for that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, like I said, if you're in college, kind of what I was getting at, really focus on the exam, start studying early, and really, LSAT is a skills exam, so it's a little different than other ones. LSAT is really testing how well you can identify logical fallacies, which I would just say watch the debates and you'll see them all over the place. but really those kind of three basic ones. But so it's more how you can look at things and apply it, which is exactly what kind of the humanities teaches you, especially like history. History is almost like applied English in a way, because you're applying applied English and philosophy, because you're applying logic and writing to a topic, history in this case. So kind of those broader majors are honestly, again, unless you're being a nurse or you're being an engineer, those broader majors or, more of the, applied majors, international studies, business or what, really try to get as good a grades as possible, because I remember my roommate my freshman year said, "Hey man, C's get degrees." I'm like, "Yeah, they do, but they don't get you all those back there." So just saying. So
Yep.
don't follow that stuff. That's just cop out. So get your best grades, study for the test, and when you do get in, and definitely when you do kind of get into the work field, or get into grad school. With grad school, you're going to think even more. But then when you get into work, try to realize that you're not so much thinking about concepts or learning as much as like really social skills, social everything, like how much to present to someone, kind of knowing almost firsthand the minute they come in what level of information you're going to present, and how you're going to speak, and and how, I mean, what level are you going to get into something, or how much is too much, those kind of things. So you really, and when we hired this, our first person, it was pretty much social, like I said, we looked at, okay, they have a college degree, but we really looked at, and with a lot of them, law to a lesser extent, but certainly finance, or any sort of sales development, that's a huge part of the economy, is social skills. It really is just soft skills. It's very much soft skills. So, your best bet the hard part is getting the interview. And I would say if you don't get selected, it has nothing to do with you. It's literally, we got thousands of them. We had to draw a line at some point. So, and we picked based on, and honestly, we get fatigued. We interviewed 10, 15 different people, and we were already like, okay, we got to pick someone. Like, we could have gone back into the pool. We really didn't want to. Our HR person was like, no, cut out, you're cut off, So, don't take it personally, I think would be my advice. Just don't take it personally, and don't overthink.
Great advice. I definitely like that. So with all your hiring and working with that, are there any like quote unquote negative traits that you're seeing in maybe more recent college graduates, or anything that you think that they need to work on a bit more? I mean, I know the
Yeah.
last alumni we talked to talked about, social skills, especially with the pandemic, keeping an eye on those and making sure you don't close off and like anything like that.
Nate Hastow, I'd have to
Yeah.
agree. And yeah, I'm talking to him later. Yeah, no, yeah, I definitely have to agree with the man. That is absolutely true. Social skills. I would say that I'm not into like generation assigning. That's basically another form of stereotyping. But I would definitely, I would definitely urge everyone to have social skills. That applies to everybody, because believe me, it
Oh yeah.
wasn't just young people. So I think that's the biggest thing. Kind of what I was saying is how to speak to someone, and a lot of that, again, when you're coming from college, you're almost gonna be, and then especially if you go to advanced school, advanced college and graduate school, your mind is gonna be at a level that is not gonna, I just guarantee you, is not gonna be in sync with the workplace, because the workplace is not a intellectual environment, it's a social environment, both for clients, for everyone you deal with. And so, I think I say kids, we're so smart these days that, we kind of, we almost like, I was talking up here and not even consciously realizing it, but just like, when I would type something, it'd be like, oh no, I'd go back. Okay, no. What am I really trying to say? What am I really trying to say? And use plain English. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing Donald Trump does, is plain English. And the reason why he does it is that's just how you're gonna, you know, that's how people are gonna connect
Hmm.
in kind of a work environment, in a professional setting. Now, that doesn't mean, slang and that kind of stuff, but at least, don't use like
I don't need
requisite.
to like break out the dictionary and be like, wait, what did he just say?
Don't use, yeah, this is one of the requisite requirements. Just say, hey, we need this.
Definitely. Is there anything that would surprise people about your daily work?
Well, yeah, probably. So even though I'm an investment counsel and estate planner, if the garbage needs to be taken out, I'll do it, just because I don't like smelling garbage. So, and I do my own dishes, and I, cook for myself, and all the other things that you'd expect a normal human being to do. And I do mean normal in the everyone thinks of normal as a more of a socio-economic thing. It's really a action thing. Like normal in terms of, do you clean up after yourself? Do you, are you polite? Those kind of things are what workplaces are looking for. Do you cook fish in a microwave? The classic kind of, don't do that. So you know, those kind of things. And like just thinking about other people is the biggest thing. But I would say if there one surprising thing, yeah. And in fact, I learned how to palletize, like put things on pallets, wrap them up when I worked at another place because we were shorthanded and they needed someone to drive the truck and pick up stuff for donated items. I was like, I'll do it. You know.
It's always going to be the person who raises their hand and volunteers to learn another skill, that's for sure.
Well, another way to put it is, you know, the more valuable you are, the more job security you have. So,
That's definitely, I can't agree more with that. All right, so my last question, is there any other parting pieces of advice that you have for current Brockport students? You've given
um,
a lot of good advice, but is there anything else you want to give?
I think I'd probably say, you know, don't over worry. That's I think if I were to pick one generational thing, just from talking to people, you know, and just people I know, you know, there's a lot of there's a lot of, and maybe it's just the way things are now, but you know, with you know, I have to do 80 different clubs and all that stuff. I would just say really focus on, like I said, grades, tests, and you know, join a couple clubs. But when you do apply to jobs, don't think that it has anything to do with you, because that's one thing I learned early on was when I was hiring was like, oh wow, this is a totally inhumane, you know, just kind of you know, it's all about like the people there, and it's really about time management. You know, when you're in the field work, it's not, you know, and when you're studying, you have all the time in the world to think, aka worry, and you know, and then you get your assignments done. Here it's more about like, can you prioritize 8 different things? You know, if you have a call coming in, do I need to take the call, do I not? You know, so if you can get experience maybe in undergrad kind of prioritizing things, like, okay, and really it comes down to, is it due tomorrow? That's the biggest one. Like, can I not do it today? And then thinking about what's the consequence if I don't do it. So
Well, thank you for all of your advice. So I'm going to go ahead and end the recording and we'll open it up to our questions section. So I'm just going to do that.